Prince took his son to dinner. Seeing a poor mother counting coins for a meal, he did the unthinkable. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The inn was too bright for Isabel's mood. It was not a grand place, not a palace dining room with linen that hid every stain. It was busy, loud in the way hungry places always were. A piano in the corner tried to be cheerful. Plates clinked. Men laughed a little too loudly, as if laughter could prove they belonged among decent people. Isabel kept her back straight anyway. She sat close to the wall with Tomas pressed to her side, his small legs swinging under the bench because he was trying not to look tired. His hair had been smoothed with water. His shirt had been mended at the collar. Isabel had done what she always did before entering a room where others would look first and think later. She took the coins from her pocket and placed them on the table one by one. Not because she wanted anyone to see, because her own hands needed the proof. 2 copper pieces, one more, worn thin, a small silver coin that felt heavier than it had any right to. She turned it with her thumb until she found the mark that told her it was real. She swallowed. Tomas watched her, quiet. "Are we having soup?" he asked, careful, as if soup were a delicate subject. Isabel tried to smile. It felt like stretching cloth that might tear. "Perhaps," she said. "We shall see what the kitchen asks for it." Tomas leaned closer to the menu board, nailed to a post near the counter. He could not read all of it, but he could read enough to recognize what he wanted. "Bread," he said, "with oil, like yesterday." "Bread is sensible," Isabel murmured. He nodded in the solemn way children did when they pretended not to hope for more. Isabel made her fingers move faster, as if speed could turn arithmetic into mercy. She counted again, whispering numbers without sound. She calculated what she could manage and what she could not. She pictured the innkeeper's face when she ordered too little. She pictured it when she ordered nothing at all. Across the room, the front door opened, with the quick authority of people who did not hesitate at thresholds. A hush did not fall, not fully. But the air shifted. It always did when rank entered a place that tried to pretend it had none. Isabel did not look up at once. She had learned not to. Looking up too quickly could be taken as begging. Looking too slowly could be taken as insolence. It was easier to keep counting and let the world pass like weather. Then she heard a voice, low and even, and a child's lighter tone beside it. "Father, may I sit there?" the child asked. "You may sit wherever you like," the man replied, calm with the kind of calm that assumed agreement. "But we shall not inconvenience anyone." Isabel's fingers paused over the silver coin. She did not need to see to know. She had spent enough time near fine houses before everything broke to recognize the cadence of instruction that was not asked for, only given. Tomas craned his neck. His eyes widened. "Mother," he whispered. Is that a prince?" Isabel's stomach tightened. She forced her son's gaze back down with a gentle touch under his chin. "Eyes on your plate," she said softly, "not on other people's fortunes." "But, Tomas," he obeyed, though his curiosity fought him. Isabel's pride rose like a stubborn flame. It was not pride against the prince. It was pride against the whole room, against the knowledge that the presence of such a man could make her feel small if she allowed it. The chairs scraped as the newcomers took their seats. The innkeeper hurried from behind the counter, smoothing his apron as if it were a coat of arms. "Your Highness," he said, breathy with reverence, "we did not expect—" "I am only here to dine," the man replied. "Bring what you would recommend for a child, nothing too heavy, and something warm for me." Of course, the best table, Your Highness." "I prefer this one," the prince said, and Isabel heard the faintest edge in it, not angry, but final. "My son will be comfortable here." A child's chair was placed. A napkin was unfolded with unnecessary flourish. People kept eating, but their eyes slid, lingering, returning. Isabel let her coins lie where they were. She could not hide them now without looking as though she had something to hide. She forced herself to look up, briefly, only enough to understand the danger and measure it. The prince sat 2 tables away, angled in such a way that he could see the room without appearing to watch it. He was not old, not young. His face carried the kind of restraint that meant he had learned early to keep feelings behind his teeth. His clothes were fine but not excessive, as if he wished to be mistaken for merely wealthy, not royal. His child, however, had no such training. The boy turned his head openly, scanning the room as if it were a storybook. His gaze landed on Isabel's table, on the coins, on Tomas. Isabel's throat tightened. It was one thing to be judged by adults. Adults always had a reason, always a story they told themselves. Children judged with a clean honesty that felt like being seen without any protection. Mateo, she realized, because she heard the innkeeper say at once. Prince Mateo watched Tomas's hands and the way Tomas tried not to stare at other plates. Isabel shifted her palm over the coins, not to hide them, but to claim them as her own. Tomas whispered, "Mother, the prince's boy is looking at me. Let him," Isabel murmured. "We are not a spectacle." But her voice betrayed her. The words were firm, the tone was thin. A server approached with a notepad, trying to pretend nothing had changed. "Senora," he said, eyes flicking to the coins as if they were an insult. "What will you have?" Isabel kept her chin steady. "How much is the bread with oil?" she asked. The server answered. The number was not large, but it was large enough. "And the broth?" Isabel asked, though she already knew she could not afford both. The server named another price. He said it with patience that was too practiced, the patience used for people expected to ask. Isabel's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "And for the child," she said quickly, before Tomas could speak. "Is there a smaller portion?" "There is," the server said, "but it is not much cheaper." Not much cheaper. That was how the world stayed out of reach. Not by great walls, but by small, stubborn numbers. Isabel glanced at the coins again. She moved the silver coin aside, as if it were a separate question. "Bring bread," she said, "and one bowl of broth. We shall share." Tomas's lips parted, then closed. He did not protest. That made it worse. The server nodded, scribbled, and turned away. Isabel exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding her breath since the door had opened. Then she sensed movement, not at her table, but near hers, a shift of attention like a shadow passing. The prince's son stood up on his chair, craning over his table with the terrible boldness of a child who had never been slapped by consequence. "Father," the boy said, not whispering at all, "that little boy is hungry." The room did not go quiet. It did something more dangerous. It listened. Isabel felt heat rush to her face. Tomas's head dipped, as if he wished he could fold into himself. Isabel wanted to pull him close, to shield him, to make him invisible. The prince's voice came low and controlled. "Mateo," he said, warning without harshness. "Sit." "But he is," Mateo insisted. "Look, he is pretending." Isabel's stomach clenched. It was true. Tomas was pretending. He had learned early. Prince Fernando's chair scraped back just slightly. Not a dramatic movement, but enough to show he had been forced into attention. "Your Highness," the innkeeper murmured quickly, hovering. "The child speaks without—" "He speaks," the prince said, and his tone stopped the man. "That is what children do." Isabel's fingers found the silver coin again. Her first instinct was to gather her money and leave before this turned into charity offered like a coin tossed to a beggar. She did not beg. She would not. Tomas whispered, "Mother, we can go." Isabel's voice softened for him, even as her spine stayed straight. "We will not run, because a child has eyes," she said. "We will eat, and then we will go." Across the two tables, Prince Fernando looked at his son. Something flickered in his face, so quick Isabel almost missed it. Not anger, not embarrassment, discomfort. The kind that came from being asked, silently, to become the man one claimed to be. Mateo sat back down but kept watching Isabel's table as if his gaze could carry food. Prince Fernando's eyes followed his son's gaze. They landed on Isabel's coins. Isabel held his look for a heartbeat. She hated that her hands trembled. She hated that her life could be measured by the small circle of metal on wood. She hated that the prince of all people now knew it. She looked away first, not in submission, but in refusal. Refusal to be studied. Yet she could feel him still, as if attention had weight. The broth had not arrived. The bread had not arrived. The inn's usual speed seemed to have slowed at Isabel's table, as if hunger could be postponed. Mateo spoke again, quieter this time, though still audible. "Father," he said, "can we do something?" Prince Fernando did not answer at once. When he did, His voice carried a careful gentleness. "We do many things," he said. "We support charities. We provide—" "But now," Matteo insisted, "not later. Now." Isabel's throat tightened. She wished the child would stop. Each word was another pair of eyes turning her into a lesson. Prince Fernando's hand moved, not to eat, not to reach for his own glass. It hovered near his son's, then withdrew, as if he were restraining himself from the easy gesture of smoothing hair, offering comfort. He did not soothe his child. He listened to him. Then Prince Fernando looked toward the innkeeper. The innkeeper perked up at once, eager. "Your Highness?" Prince Fernando spoke clearly, in the tone used for commands that did not expect debate. "Bring a full meal to that table," he said, nodding toward Isabel without pointing, as if even pointing would be a breach. "Meat, vegetables, bread and fruit, and something warm for the child. Proper portions, not scraps." Isabel's heart slammed against her ribs. Before she could move, Prince Fernando continued, "And serve them first." A collective stillness spread through the nearest tables like spilled wine. Forks paused. A laugh died halfway. Someone coughed to cover surprise. The innkeeper blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "perhaps, if you prefer, we can send it quietly." "I do not," Prince Fernando replied. The innkeeper's mouth tightened, then he bowed. "As you wish," he said, and hurried away. Isabel stood abruptly, the bench scraping. The sound cut through the room like a knife through cloth, and every head turned fully now. Tomás clutched her sleeve, frightened. "Mother," he whispered. "What is happening?" Isabel gathered the coins with swift, trembling fingers, not because she needed them now, but because she would not leave them on the table like a sign that she could be purchased. She took one step toward the prince's table, not to thank him, not to curtsy, but to stop the moment from swallowing her whole. Prince Fernando looked up. His expression remained composed, but his eyes sharpened, as if he expected her anger and accepted it. Isabel kept her voice low, though her cheeks burned. "Your Highness," she said, the title tasting bitter because it forced distance even as he crossed it. "I did not ask for this." "I know," he replied. "Then why?" she said, and her fingers curled around the coins until they hurt. "Have you made me the center of your dining room?" Matteo leaned forward, eyes wide, listening as if this were the most important conversation in Spain. Prince Fernando's gaze flicked briefly to his son, then returned to Isabel. "Because my son asked me a question I could not ignore," he said evenly. "And because your child deserves a meal that does not require an accounting on a table." Isabel felt something twist in her chest. Fury, yes. And something else, more dangerous. A flicker of relief that tried to bloom, and she stamped it down. "I can feed my child," she said. Prince Fernando's voice remained calm. "Then allow the inn to serve you without shame." Isabel's breath caught. Shame. He had named it without pity. That was almost worse. "Without shame," she repeated softly. "Your Highness, you have invited every eye in this room to watch me swallow." Matteo's small voice cut in, earnest and untrained. "I did not mean to hurt you," he said quickly. "I only saw—" Isabel looked at him, and her anger faltered. The boy's face was open. He was not cruel. He was simply young. She softened her tone for him, though her pride remained rigid. "You did not hurt me," she told Matteo. "You spoke. That is not a sin." Matteo exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath. Prince Fernando watched Isabel with a steadiness that felt like a choice. "You may refuse," he said. "I will not force you to accept anything, but I will not pretend I did not see." Isabel's lips parted, then closed. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to leave with her head high, and her son hungry rather than sit and become a story told by strangers. But Tomás's fingers were still on her sleeve. His touch was small. It asked for food more than pride. Isabel lowered herself back onto the bench slowly. Her hands trembled as she placed the coins in her pocket. "You have caused trouble," she said, voice low, aimed at the prince alone. "People will speak." "They always do," Prince Fernando replied, and there was a hint of weariness in it, as if he had spent years being spoken about. Isabel's eyes narrowed. "Not like this." He held her gaze. "Perhaps they should." The innkeeper returned with 2 servers in tow, carrying plates as if they were carrying a proclamation. He set down bread, then broth, then a small dish of stewed vegetables, then meat that looked too fine for Isabel's side of the room, then fruit. He arranged it quickly, avoiding Isabel's eyes. "Enjoy," he said stiffly, then turned with an exaggerated bow toward Prince Fernando, as if reminding everyone where generosity supposedly belonged. Isabel's throat tightened again. She hated that the food smelled good. She hated that Tomás stared at it with wide, careful eyes. Tomás whispered, "Mother, can we?" Isabel looked at her son. Hunger had made him polite beyond his years. It had made him cautious. That was the true humiliation. She picked up a piece of bread and placed it in Tomás's hand. "Yes," she said quietly. "We can." Tomás bit into it, and his eyes closed for a second, not from drama, but from relief. Isabel's chest ached. Across the room, Mateo watched, his shoulders relaxing as if a knot inside him had loosened. Prince Fernando remained seated, but he did not return immediately to his own plate. His attention stayed on Isabel's table, not in the way of a man expecting gratitude, but in the way of a man waiting to ensure the act did not turn into cruelty. Isabel lifted the spoon, then paused. She leaned slightly toward Tomás. "Eat," she murmured, "slowly. Do not rush." Tomás nodded and obeyed. A voice drifted from a nearby table, meant to be soft, but not soft enough. "Well," a woman murmured, "that is new." "A prince making a show," a man replied, amused. "In an inn, of all places." Another voice, sharper, said, "It is not only the prince. Look at her, she does not even curtsy." Isabel kept her eyes on Tomás. If she looked up, she might break. Mateo shifted in his chair and spoke to his father again, quieter now. "Father," he asked, "is she angry?" Prince Fernando answered just as quietly. "She has reason," he said. Mateo frowned. "But we helped." Prince Fernando's gaze remained on Isabel. Help given without care can feel like a wound. Isabel's grip on the spoon tightened. She pretended she had not heard, but the words settled somewhere inside her, unwanted, because they were true. She took a sip of broth. Warmth spread through her in a way that made her eyes sting. She blinked hard and set the spoon down. Tomás glanced at her, worried. "Mother?" he whispered. Isabel forced a smile for him. "It is hot," she said. "That is all." Tomás nodded, accepting it because children accepted what mothers offered when mothers could not offer truth. The innkeeper returned again, this time with a cloth and a fussed-over air, hovering near Isabel's table as if he could not decide whether to treat her as honored or inconvenient. "Señora," he said too loudly, "if there is anything else you require—" Isabel met his eyes for the first time, and her voice was calm. "What I require," she said, "is to eat without being announced." The innkeeper's cheeks reddened. He stepped back, muttering apologies. Prince Fernando's lips pressed together, as if he approved but would not say so aloud. Isabel cut a small piece of meat and placed it on Tomás's plate, her hands steadied as she did it. Feeding her child was the only thing that made sense in any room. When Tomás ate, some of the tension left his shoulders. He looked, for the first time in days, like a child and not a small guardian of his mother's fear. Isabel felt her own breath deepen. She hated that she felt grateful. She hated that gratitude might bind her to a man she did not know. The prince's table was served at last. Plates arrived for Fernando and Mateo. The innkeeper tried to restore the proper order, speaking loudly about the prince's preferences, as if reminding the room who mattered most. Fernando did not respond to the performance. He lifted his glass, then paused when he saw Mateo staring at Isabel again. Mateo's eyes were fixed not on the food now, but on the way Isabel kept her hand close to Tomás's shoulder, like a silent guardrail. "Father," Mateo said, "does the little boy have a father?" Isabel's spine stiffened. Prince Fernando's voice was steady, but softer. "That is not our question to ask," he said. Mateo's brow furrowed. "But if he does not, who helps her?" Isabel's throat tightened. She wanted to tell the child, no one. She wanted to say, "I help myself. I do what I must." But her tongue stayed still. Fernando answered after a brief pause. "Sometimes people help themselves for a long time," he said, "and then sometimes someone sees them." Isabel's hand trembled slightly. She pressed her fingertips to the edge of the table to steady them. The room began to breathe again. Conversation resumed in cautious waves. Plates clinked. Someone laughed, too bright. Isabel tried to return to the small world of her table to make the prince's presence irrelevant. Yet she could not ignore the fact that he had changed the shape of the evening, not with force, with attention, with a choice spoken aloud. Tomas finished his bread and looked up at her with hopeful eyes that hurt more than hunger ever had. "Mother," he said quietly, "may I have fruit too?" Isabel swallowed. "Yes," she said, and her voice almost broke on the word. She handed him a piece, then took one herself, if only to show him she was not disappearing into worry. Across the room, the front door opened again. A gust of cool air came in with new arrivals, coats, boots, the smell of travel. A man stepped inside, well-dressed, his posture carrying confidence. He removed his gloves as if he belonged everywhere. He glanced around with the casual interest of someone seeking a familiar face. His eyes passed over Prince Fernando, and he gave a quick, respectful nod, the kind given to a title that mattered. Then his gaze slid to Isabel's table. Isabel did not notice him at first. She was wiping a drop of broth from Tomas's chin with her thumb, a mother's gesture, small and unremarkable. The man stopped, his head tilted slightly, his eyes narrowed as if memory had reached out and taken him by the collar. Isabel felt it then, the prickling sensation of being recognized, not admired, not pitied, known. She looked up. The man's lips parted in a slow, startled line. He did not call out. He did not make a scene. He simply turned his head toward the person beside him, leaning close enough to whisper. Isabel saw the whisper. She saw the way his eyes flicked back to her, confirming. Prince Fernando noticed too. His gaze sharpened. His posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, as if he had learned to read rooms for danger that wore polite faces. The man whispered again, and this time Isabel caught the word as it slipped through the air like a needle. "Navarro." A second voice, soft with ugly delight, replied, "That fallen girl." Isabel's fingers went cold around the edge of the table. The whisper did not stay small. It never did. It moved like a stain. "Navarro," someone repeated, softer, as if tasting the name. "A shame," another voice answered, pretending sympathy while enjoying the story. Isabel kept her gaze on Tomas's plate, but her appetite vanished. Tomas, sensing the change, slowed his chewing. He looked at her as if he had done something wrong. "Mother," he whispered, "why are they saying our name?" Isabel forced her mouth to move. "They are not speaking to us," she lied gently. "Eat." Tomas swallowed, but his eyes stayed wide. He was too young to understand gossip, yet old enough to feel its teeth. Across the room, Prince Fernando lifted his head slightly, as if a sound had reached him that mattered more than the piano. His eyes moved to the traveller who had spoken. The traveller seemed pleased with himself, leaning close to his companion as if sharing an amusing detail. Matteo noticed too. He leaned toward his father. "Father," he said, quieter now, "they are being unkind." Fernando did not answer at once. His gaze stayed on Isabel's table for a heartbeat, then returned to his son. "Keep your voice low," he said, "but keep your eyes open." Matteo nodded, solemn. Isabel wanted to leave. The food on the table had felt like mercy a moment ago. Now it felt like a chain attached to a public act. She could imagine tomorrow's version of the story. A poor woman, shameless, accepting a prince's attention. A fallen woman, rewarded for some hidden cleverness. She had heard such versions before. She knew how quickly they hardened into truth. She slid her hand over Tomas's plate, gathering the remaining fruit. "Tomas," she murmured, "we are going." Tomas startled. "But I didn't finish the—" "You ate enough," she said, and her voice carried a tenderness that tried to soothe the abruptness. "We will go now." He obeyed quickly, wiping his mouth with his sleeve before she could stop him. Isabel rose, keeping her spine straight. She did not glance at the prince. She could not. Looking might be taken as thanks. Looking might be taken as invitation. She needed the room to understand one thing. She would not be owned by gratitude. But as she reached for her small bundle, a voice stopped her. "Senora." It was the server, hovering too close. His eyes darted to the prince's table as if seeking instruction. "You are leaving?" he asked, not politely, Not kindly. Isabel kept her tone even. Yes. The meal has been served, he said. It must be accounted for. Isabel felt her cheeks burn. It has been accounted for, she said, measured. You heard the prince. The server's mouth tightened. It is not my place to assume. Isabel's fingers curled around her bundle. Then Prince Fernando's chair scraped back. It was not loud, but it carried. The room heard it. The room always heard a prince. Fernando stood. He did not stride over in a rush. He approached at a controlled pace, like a man walking into a conversation already too public. You will not question her as if she has stolen a plate, Fernando said calmly. The server bowed quickly. Your Highness, I only meant— You meant to protect yourself, Fernando replied. Do so by behaving with courtesy. The server swallowed. Yes, Your Highness. Isabel's breath tightened in her chest. She did not want this, not again, not more attention, not more eyes. She turned to Fernando, keeping her voice low. Please, she said, do not continue. Fernando met her gaze, steady. If I stop now, they learn the wrong lesson. Isabel's lips pressed together. They will learn whatever suits them. Behind her, Tomas clung to her skirt. Mateo stood up at his own table, half rising as if he wanted to come closer, then stopped when his father glanced at him. Stay, Fernando murmured to his son. Watch. Learn. Mateo sat slowly, but his hands clenched on the edge of the table. Isabel took a step back, putting space between herself and Fernando. I will go, she said. That is all. Let it end. Fernando's eyes softened, just slightly. I am trying to let it end with dignity. Isabel almost laughed, but there was no humor in her. Dignity, she repeated. In this room? A small chuckle came from the traveler's side of the room. It was quiet, but it was meant to be heard. Isabel did not look at him. Looking would confirm his power. She turned to guide Tomas toward the aisle. Then a new voice cut in, bright with forced respect. Your Highness. The innkeeper appeared again, wiping his hands on his apron, though they were already clean. He approached Fernando, not Isabel, as if she were furniture that had begun to speak. What is it? Fernando asked. The innkeeper's eyes flicked toward Isabel, then away. There is a matter of propriety, he said carefully. These things can be misunderstood. People may speak. It is my duty to ensure that you do not offend your paying guests, Fernando said. The innkeeper bowed. I serve all guests, Your Highness. Then serve them with decency, Fernando replied. Isabel's heart beat too fast. She hated that the prince's defense felt like a shield she had not asked for. She hated that it also felt like relief. The traveler spoke again, this time a little louder, as if the room belonged to him. A prince has a generous heart, he said. Truly. It is admirable. His tone made the words poisonous. His companion replied, especially toward certain sorts. Isabel's stomach clenched. Tomas's small fingers tightened on her skirt. Prince Fernando turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing toward the voices. I did not ask for commentary, he said, mild and deadly. The traveler's smile did not falter. He bowed in his seat without rising, a gesture that looked respectful and felt mocking. Forgive me, Your Highness, he said. Old habits, old memories, old memories. Isabel's hands trembled. She forced herself to walk, to get Tomas out, to leave the room before the story grew teeth. But the aisle narrowed as another figure appeared at the front door. A man in neat clothes entered, not dressed as a traveler, not dressed as a laborer. His posture was trained. His expression was practiced neutrality. He held a small leather case under his arm, as if it were important. Isabel felt her lungs tighten, not because she knew him, because she knew what he was, a messenger. He paused just inside, scanning the room. His eyes found Prince Fernando immediately, and he walked straight toward him with the certainty of someone sent by power. The innkeeper brightened with nervous satisfaction, as if help had arrived from the heavens. The messenger stopped at Fernando's table and bowed. Your Highness, he said quietly, but not so quietly that the nearest tables could not hear. Mateo stared at him with suspicion, as if he could smell trouble. Fernando did not sit. He did not offer his hand. He simply waited. The messenger opened the leather case and removed a sealed card, thick paper, a crest pressed into red wax. Isabel's gaze snagged on the wax like a hook. A crest. She knew that crest. Her mouth went dry. She could not breathe properly for a moment. The messenger held the card out. Fernando took it without haste, but his eyes sharpened when he saw the seal. He broke it with a firm thumb. Isabel watched his face as he read. His expression barely changed, yet something in his jaw set, as if he was swallowing a sour taste. Mateo leaned forward. "Father," he whispered. Fernando lowered the card slightly, keeping his voice level. "Eat," he told his son. Mateo's eyes flicked to Isabel, then back to his father. He obeyed, but he did not take his eyes off the messenger. The messenger waited, hands folded, posture perfect. Fernando looked up. "Who sent you?" he asked, though the seal had already answered. The messenger held his tone carefully. "A friend of the crown, Your Highness. A household that has always wished to support you." Isabel's fingers went numb. "Support you. Always wished." Words used by people who wanted something. Fernando glanced briefly toward Isabel, as if checking whether she had seen the crest. Isabel looked away immediately. She would not confirm anything. She would not give the crest the satisfaction of recognition, but her body betrayed her. She swayed slightly. Tomás looked up at her, frightened. "Mother," he whispered, "are you ill?" Isabel swallowed. "No," she said. I am only warm." The messenger spoke again, smooth as polished wood. "Your Highness is reminded," he said, "that appearances carry consequence. The evening's generosity may be interpreted in ways unhelpful to your position." A murmur rose from nearby tables. People pretended not to listen while leaning closer. Fernando's voice remained calm. "I am aware of interpretations," he said. "The household wishes only to spare Your Highness," the messenger continued, "from malicious tongues." Isabel nearly laughed at the false concern. Malicious tongues were always guided by malicious hands. Fernando lifted the card slightly, as if weighing it. "Does this household often send instructions into inns?" he asked. The messenger's smile was faint. "Only when urgency requires it." Fernando's eyes cooled. "You may return and tell them my supper is my own affair." The messenger hesitated, the first crack in his practiced ease. "Your Highness," he said, still polite, "the household would regret misunderstanding. There are future matters that benefit from unity." Future matters. Isabel's heart hammered. Mateo set his fork down. "Father," he whispered, "I do not like him." Fernando did not look at his son, but his voice softened just enough to soothe. "You need not like everyone," he said. "You need only learn how to recognize a man who speaks like a gate." Isabel pressed her fingertips to the table edge, steadying herself. The messenger's gaze flicked toward Isabel for the first time, quick and assessing. Then it returned to Fernando, with something like quiet triumph, as if to say, "You see, this is what must be avoided." Isabel could not stay. The crest had reached her. The past had found her chair in an inn. She leaned down to Tomás. "We are going now," she whispered. Tomás nodded quickly, sensing the urgency. Isabel stepped toward the aisle again, pulling her son gently along. The innkeeper moved faster this time, intercepting her path with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Señora," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "One moment, please." Isabel stopped, her stomach twisting. "Yes?" she said, careful. The innkeeper held a ledger in his hands, thick and worn. He tapped it with one finger, as if it were a judge's gavel. "There is a small matter," he said, "a balance." Isabel felt heat climb her neck. "I have paid what I owed," she said, "for my bread, for my broth." The innkeeper's smile widened. "Oh, not this evening's order," he said quickly, glancing toward Fernando as if to reassure the prince. "That has been as graciously managed. No, this is from before." Isabel's vision narrowed. "From before," she repeated, and her voice almost failed. "I have not been here before." The innkeeper made a sympathetic sound, the sound people made when they wish to appear kind while crushing you. "Perhaps you forget," he said. "It happens. Hard times make the mind unsettled." Isabel's fingers curled around Tomás's hand. "I do not forget," she said, "and I am not unsettled." The innkeeper's eyes hardened a fraction. "The name," he said, tapping the ledger again, "is written." Isabel's throat tightened. She knew this trick. Names written by others. Stories pinned down in ink so the victim could not escape without tearing themselves. "Show me," she said. The innkeeper hesitated, then opened the ledger as if granting a privilege. He turned it toward her, but not fully, keeping it close enough that he could yank it away. Isabel leaned in. There it was, her name, Isabel Navarro. And beside it, numbers that made her stomach drop, too high, too neat, too certain. Tomas tugged at her sleeve. "Mother, what is it?" Isabel could not answer him. Her mouth would not shape words. The innkeeper's voice was almost soothing. "You see," he said, "it is all recorded. Lodging, meals, small comforts, it adds up." "I did not," Isabel whispered. "I did not take lodging here." The innkeeper shrugged. "The record says otherwise." Isabel looked up at him, and for a moment her pride was a blade. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. "You wrote my name," she said, low. "Why?" The innkeeper's smile tightened. "Senora, it is not personal. It is business." The traveller chuckled again from his table. "Business," he echoed, as if savouring it. Isabel felt her hands begin to shake. She forced them still by gripping Tomas's fingers gently, not hard enough to hurt him, but hard enough to anchor herself. Prince Fernando stepped forward. "Enough," he said. The innkeeper turned quickly, bowing. "Your Highness, you must understand," he said, spreading his hands as if he were the victim. "I cannot allow debts to go unaddressed. It encourages dishonesty." Fernando's eyes narrowed. "Do you often accuse women in front of a room full of strangers?" he asked. The innkeeper's cheeks reddened. "I do not accuse. I only present the record." Fernando held out his hand. "Give me the ledger," he said. The innkeeper's grip tightened. "Your Highness," he said, nervous, "this is a private account." Fernando's voice remained calm, but it carried authority like iron beneath velvet. "Give it to me." The innkeeper hesitated one more heartbeat, then handed it over as if he were surrendering a crown. Fernando looked at the page. His brow barely moved, but his eyes sharpened the way they had when he read the sealed card. "This handwriting," Fernando said quietly, "is yours?" The innkeeper swallowed. "I oversee my accounts, yes." Fernando looked up. "And you can swear the woman before you incurred these charges?" The innkeeper's eyes darted around, seeking support from the room, from the traveller, from the messenger, from anyone. "She is known," the innkeeper said, choosing his words carefully. "There are people who—" "Answer my question," Fernando interrupted. Isabel's heart hammered. She did not want the prince to fight her battle, but she could not deny what was happening. The trap was tightening with every polite word. The innkeeper licked his lips. "I can swear," he said, and his voice wavered for the first time, "that the account is accurate." Isabel's breath caught. A lie spoken as an oath was still a lie, but it was a lie built to stand. Fernando closed the ledger slowly. "Then you will not object to this account being examined in the morning," he said, "by someone who does not profit from its conclusion." The innkeeper's smile returned, strained. "Your Highness," he said, "that is unnecessary." "It is a small sum. It is a matter of dignity," Fernando replied. Isabel flinched at the word again. Dignity. Always spoken by those who could afford it. Fernando turned slightly toward her, keeping his voice low enough that it did not become a proclamation. "I can settle it now," he said. "If you wish." Isabel's pride surged. "No," she said at once. Fernando did not argue. He only waited, as if he understood that her refusal was not aimed at him, but at the whole structure of humiliation. Isabel lifted her chin. "I will not have my name purchased," she said. "Not even by a prince." A few heads turned. A few mouths tightened. The room loved a proud poor woman almost as much as it loved a broken one. Fernando's gaze held hers, steady. "Then what do you want?" he asked simply. The question struck her harder than the ledger. No one asked her what she wanted. They asked what she could pay, what she could prove, what she could accept. Isabel swallowed. "I want to leave," she said, voice low. "With my son, without being dragged through your dining room like a warning." Fernando nodded once, as if honoring the answer. "Then you will leave," he said. The innkeeper lifted his hands, alarmed. "Your Highness, I cannot—" Fernando turned to him, and his calm became something colder. "You can," he said, "because you will not stop her. Not tonight. The innkeeper's eyes darted to the messenger, as if seeking support. The messenger remained still, face smooth, saying nothing, but his silence felt like permission for trouble. The traveler leaned back in his chair, enjoying the scene. Matteo stood again, unable to keep still. "Father," he said, voice trembling with outrage he did not know how to shape. "They are trying to trap her." Fernando did not look at his son, but his voice softened slightly. "Yes," he said. "They are." Matteo's face tightened. "But why?" Fernando's eyes flicked to the messenger's crest, then to Isabel. "Because it is easy," he said quietly, "and because some people cannot bear to see kindness without turning it into a lesson." Isabel wanted to pull Tomas away. She wanted to escape the room before the innkeeper found another way to tighten the chain. She tugged Tomas gently. "Come," she whispered. Tomas stepped forward, but the innkeeper moved sideways, blocking the aisle with his body. "Señora," he said, and now his politeness was thinning. "You cannot leave with an unpaid balance." Isabel's heart pounded. She could feel eyes on her back, like hands pushing. Fernando stepped between her and the innkeeper, with a quiet decisiveness that made the room draw breath. "You will step aside," he said. The innkeeper swallowed hard. "Your Highness," he pleaded, "if I allow this, others will—" Fernando's tone remained even. "If you allow this," he said, "you will have shown a woman and her child basic respect. If you refuse, you will have shown the room something else entirely." The innkeeper's cheeks flushed, anger and fear mixed. "And you will ruin my establishment," he hissed, too low for most to hear, but not low enough for Isabel. Fernando's eyes did not blink. "You ruin it yourself when you trade decency for gossip," he replied. The innkeeper glanced toward the traveler again, as if waiting for a nod. The traveler lifted his glass slightly, smiling. The messenger spoke at last, his voice measured. "Your Highness," he said, "it would be wise to avoid further display." Fernando turned his head slowly. "What is your name?" he asked. The messenger hesitated. "I am not—" "What is your name?" Fernando repeated, still calm. The messenger's jaw tightened. "Ruiz," he said. "Miguel Ruiz, Your Highness." Fernando nodded slightly, as if filing it away. "Miguel Ruiz," he said, "you may tell your employer that I decide what is wise for my son to witness." Matteo's eyes widened. He looked both proud and frightened. Isabel's throat tightened. She did not want to be the reason a prince quarreled with powerful households. That kind of quarrel never landed on princes alone. It landed on women like her. She leaned close to Fernando, her voice barely above breath. "Stop," she said. "Please. You do not understand what you are touching." Fernando's gaze remained on the innkeeper. "Then help me understand," he said, still quiet. Isabel's hands trembled again. She felt Tomas press closer to her leg. She glanced at the crest one more time in her mind. The wax, the shape that had once been stamped on letters that decided fates. Her vision blurred for a heartbeat. She forced it clear. The innkeeper finally stepped aside, but only half, as if leaving space for one more humiliation. "You may go," he said, voice tight, "but the account remains." Isabel did not answer. She guided Tomas forward, moving carefully through the aisle, past tables where eyes followed her like a procession. Matteo's gaze met hers as she passed. He looked at her with something like apology and something like determination, as if he had decided never to forget her face. Isabel did not know what to do with that look. She simply inclined her head. A tiny gesture, not gratitude, not submission, just acknowledgement that he was a child who had not yet learned cruelty. She reached the doorway. Cool air met her face. For a moment, she thought she had escaped. Then she heard the traveler's voice behind her, low and satisfied. "She runs," he murmured, "just as she did before." Isabel froze. "Before." Tomas tugged her hand. "Mother?" Isabel's breath came shallow. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. Prince Fernando's voice reached her from behind, nearer than she expected. "Isabel Navarro," he said quietly. Hearing her full name in his mouth made her knees almost buckle. It was not the prince who frightened her. It was what his knowing meant. It meant the room's whispers could follow her beyond the door. She turned her head slightly, not fully, unable to face him and the room at once. "Yes," she said, voice thin. "That is my name." Fernando stepped closer, keeping his tone low as if trying to give her privacy inside a public place. "Who is that man?" he asked, meaning the traveller. Isabel's mouth went dry. She did not answer, because if she answered, the past would become real again in the air, not just in her mind. Fernando's voice softened further. "Tell me what you need," he said. "Right now." Isabel looked down at Tomas. Her child's face was pale, confused, trying to be brave. She could not protect him from hunger if she ran. She could not protect him from gossip if she stayed. And now she could not protect him from the past, because the past had walked into the inn wearing gloves. Her chest tightened until it hurt. She leaned her mouth close to Tomas's hair as if whispering comfort, but the words were meant for Fernando alone. "They found me," Isabel whispered, shaken. "They found me. They found me," Isabel whispered, shaken. "They found me." Prince Fernando did not ask who. Not yet. He only shifted his body slightly as if to block the doorway from the eyes behind them. "Look at me," he said softly. Isabel's gaze lifted to his for a heartbeat. She wished she had not. It was easier to endure strangers than to endure someone who might actually listen. "I cannot," she said, and she hated the tremor in her voice. "You can," he replied. "For one moment. So I understand what I must do." Isabel's mouth tightened. "What you must do is nothing." Fernando's eyes remained steady. "That is not what your face says." Behind them, the innkeeper's voice rose, falsely concerned. "Señora, if you leave in such haste, it suggests—" "It suggests nothing," Fernando said without turning. "You have said enough." The traveller's chuckle drifted again. "Oh, let her go, innkeeper. Let her run. It will only confirm what we already know." Isabel's fingers clenched around Tomas's hand so tightly the child winced. "Mother," Tomas whispered, frightened. "Your hand hurts." Isabel released him at once, stroking his knuckles as if she could erase the fear. "I am sorry," she murmured. "Stay close." Prince Fernando turned his head slightly toward the room, his voice low but carrying. "My son," he said. "Come here." Mateo slid off his chair quickly, napkin forgotten. He hurried over, stopping at his father's side like a small soldier who did not yet know what war was. "Yes, father," Mateo said, eyes wide. Fernando placed his hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. It was not a grip. It was a signal. "Stand here," he said. "Do not speak unless I ask you." Mateo swallowed. "Yes." Isabel stared at that simple touch. She had never seen a nobleman hold a child, as if the child's feelings mattered. Not in public. Not when eyes were sharp. The messenger, Miguel Ruiz, took one step forward as if he might intervene. "Your Highness," he began. Fernando did not look at him. "Not now," Fernando said. The messenger's lips tightened. He retreated half a step, but his gaze flicked to Isabel like a pin. The innkeeper raised his voice again, louder, brighter, meant to sound official. "I have already sent word," he announced, addressing the room as if the room were a court. "The municipal clerk will come. There must be a record when a debt is disputed." Isabel's stomach dropped. A record, ink, paper, a seal. That was how rumors became law. Fernando's head turned sharply. "You sent for an official," he said, still calm, but now there was unmistakable displeasure beneath it. The innkeeper bowed too deeply. "For my protection, Your Highness. And for yours. Everything must be proper." "Proper," Isabel whispered, bitter. "Always proper when it harms." Fernando heard her. His eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "You will not be recorded as a criminal," he said quietly. Isabel's laugh came out as a breath. "You speak as if you can stop ink," she said. "Ink is the favorite weapon of people who never lift a hand." Mateo's brow furrowed at the word weapon, but Isabel did not mean steel. She meant paper. Fernando seemed to understand. He nodded once as if accepting a truth that offended him. "Then we will meet ink with ink," he said. "And truth with truth." Isabel looked at him sharply. "You cannot possibly know the truth," she said. Fernando's gaze held hers. "Then tell me," he replied. Isabel's mouth opened, then closed. Her throat tightened until it hurt. Tomas tugged her sleeve. "Mother, can we go home?" Home. A rented room with thin walls and a landlady who counted every coin. A place that could be taken if her name became a stain on paper. Isabel lowered her voice for her child. We will go, she promised, though she did not know how. The innkeeper cleared his throat, delighted by his own importance. Until the clerk arrives, he said, no one leaves with a disputed account. That is customary. Fernando turned fully now. The air seemed to stiffen around him. Customary, he repeated. Yes, Your Highness, the innkeeper said quickly. It prevents the poor from escaping your imagination, Isabel snapped before she could stop herself. The room drew breath. Isabel instantly regretted it, not because she had spoken truth, because truth spoken aloud in such a room always demanded payment. The innkeeper's face reddened. Señora, he hissed, mind your tongue. Fernando's voice cut cleanly through. She will mind nothing except her dignity, he said, and I will ensure she keeps it. The traveller rose at last, smoothing his coat as if he were preparing to attend a theatre performance. Your Highness, he said, stepping forward with a polite smile. Allow me. I can clarify matters. The woman is known in certain circles. There have been incidents. Isabel's stomach turned. Fernando looked at him, expression unreadable. And you are? Fernando asked. The traveller bowed, more correctly than the innkeeper ever had. Don Aurelio Santisteban, he said, at your Highness's service. Fernando's eyes narrowed slightly, as if the name meant something, though not something pleasant. Aurelio Santisteban, Fernando repeated. Do you often clarify women in inns? Aurelio's smile did not falter. When decency is at stake, he said, and when your Highness's reputation is being used as a blanket for... For what? Fernando asked, mild. Aurelio's gaze slid to Isabel with practiced contempt. For a person who has not lived decently, he said. Isabel's hands trembled. Tomás pressed closer to her leg. Mateo's face tightened, and he whispered without thinking, That is cruel. Fernando's hand on Mateo's shoulder tightened just enough to quiet him. Aurelio pretended he had not heard the child. Isabel lifted her chin. You do not know my life, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. Aurelio's smile turned sharp. I know your name, he replied, and I know why it became useful to whisper. Isabel felt her vision narrow again. Fernando took one step forward, placing himself between Aurelio and Isabel without touching her. You will speak with respect, Fernando said softly. Aurelio's eyes flicked to Fernando's stance. His smile thinned. Of course, he said. I would never disrespect your Highness. You are not speaking to me, Fernando replied. You are speaking about her, in front of her child. Aurelio's mouth opened, then closed, annoyed that the prince had framed it so cleanly. The messenger, Miguel Ruiz, cleared his throat, trying to reclaim control of the situation. Your Highness, he said, this is precisely what my employers wished to prevent. Scenes invite stories. Fernando looked at him at last. Then perhaps your employers should stop sending men into public rooms, he said. Miguel's jaw tightened. They wish only to protect... Enough, Fernando said. Miguel fell silent, but his eyes remained fixed, calculating. Isabel's heart hammered. She did not fear Miguel Ruiz. She feared the hands behind him. She leaned down, her voice trembling only for Tomás. Listen to me, she whispered. If anyone asks you questions, you say nothing unless I tell you. Do you understand? Tomás nodded quickly. Yes, mother. And you stay close, she added. He wrapped both hands around her wrist, as if anchoring himself. The innkeeper returned to the counter and began fussing with cups as if he were merely busy. But Isabel could see his satisfaction. He had summoned authority. He had pulled a woman's name into his ledger, and now into the air. Fernando's expression was controlled, but something in him had changed. He was no longer simply a man who had offered a meal. He looked like a man who had stepped onto a line and realized it was sharper than he expected. Mateo whispered, almost inaudible, Father, will they take her away? Fernando's gaze stayed forward. No, he said quietly. Mateo clung to that word like a prayer. Minutes passed like slow drips. The piano kept playing, stubbornly cheerful, as if refusing to acknowledge the tension. People pretended to eat. The inn tried to continue being an inn while the room became something else. Then the door opened again. A man entered, not grand, not shabby. Clean coat, plain hat, a small leather folder under his arm, ink stains on his fingers that told Isabel everything. The municipal clerk. He paused, eyes scanning, and the innkeeper hurried to him, nearly bowing. "Señor Valdez," the innkeeper said eagerly, "thank you for coming so quickly." The clerk's gaze moved to Fernando at once. He blinked, startled, then bowed deeply, color rising in his cheeks. "Your Highness," he said, flustered. "I did not know." "You are here to do your duty," Fernando said evenly. "Do it well." The clerk straightened, swallowing. "Yes, Your Highness," he said. He looked around, uncertain where to stand. The innkeeper guided him as if directing a play. "Here," the innkeeper said, leading him toward an empty table near the center, where everyone could see. "So all can witness fairness." Isabel's stomach turned again. Fairness did not need an audience. Humiliation did. Fernando's voice cut in. "No," he said. The innkeeper froze. Fernando nodded toward a small side alcove, partly shielded by a wooden divider and a hanging curtain. "There," Fernando said. "The children will not be used as entertainment." The clerk looked relieved. The innkeeper looked displeased, but he could not argue with a prince. "Of course," the innkeeper said quickly, "as your highness wishes." Isabel did not want to go anywhere with any of them, yet she knew refusal would be painted as guilt. That was the trap. Refuse, and they wrote, "She fled." Accept, and they wrote, "She confessed by appearing." Fernando turned slightly to Isabel. "You will not be alone with them," he said quietly. "I will remain." Isabel's pride rose again, fighting with necessity. "You should not," she whispered. "It will harm you." Fernando's gaze held hers steady. "It is already done," he said. Mateo looked between them, anxious, as if he feared his father might disappear. Fernando crouched briefly to Mateo's height. "You will sit at our table," he told his son softly. "You will eat what you can, and you will keep your eyes on me. Do you understand?" Mateo nodded quickly. "Yes, father." "And you will be kind," Fernando added, voice gentle but firm. Mateo's chin lifted. "Yes." Fernando stood again and gestured subtly for Isabel to move toward the alcove. Isabel guided Tomas with her, keeping her hand on his shoulder as if the touch could protect him from ink. The clerk followed, the innkeeper close behind, and Aurelio Santisteban drifting like smoke at the edge, eager not to miss a moment. Miguel Ruiz remained near the main room, watching with the stillness of a man who would later report every word. Inside the alcove, the clerk set his folder on the table, opened it, and withdrew paper and a small inkwell. His movements were careful, almost apologetic. "Señora," he said politely, "this is a civil matter. It need not become severe. I must simply record the dispute." Isabel's voice came out controlled. "And where does this record go?" she asked. The clerk hesitated. "To the municipal office." "And who may request to see it?" Isabel pressed. The innkeeper snorted softly. "Anyone with proper cause," the clerk said. Isabel's mouth tightened. "Proper cause," she repeated. "A phrase that means whoever has power." Fernando's voice was calm. "Answer her plainly, Señor Valdez." The clerk swallowed. "It may be consulted," he admitted, "by officials and by parties named in the dispute." Aurelio leaned in slightly, smiling. "And by those whose reputations may be affected, I imagine." Fernando's eyes flicked to Aurelio. "Are you a party named in it?" Fernando asked. Aurelio spread his hands. "I am merely a concerned citizen." Fernando's voice stayed soft. "Then you are merely outside it." Aurelio's smile tightened. The innkeeper cleared his throat. "Proceed," he told the clerk, as if the clerk were his employee. The clerk dipped his pen, glanced nervously at Fernando, then began. "Name of claimant," he said, looking to the innkeeper. The innkeeper puffed up. "Gaspar Rivas, proprietor." "Name of accused party," the clerk continued, looking to Isabel. Isabel's fingers curled, but her voice stayed steady. "Isabel Navarro," she said. Tomas flinched, as if the name itself had hurt him. Fernando's gaze shifted briefly to the child, then back to the clerk. "State the nature of the claim," the clerk said, pen poised. The innkeeper leaned forward. "Unpaid lodging and meals," he said briskly, "from the spring." Isabel's breath caught. "I was not here in the spring," she said, voice tight. "I have never lodged in this inn." The clerk looked up. "Do you have proof, Señora?" Isabel nearly laughed. "Proof that I was not somewhere?" she asked, bitter. Fernando spoke evenly. Señor Valdez, he said, a claim must be supported by more than a name written by the claimant. The clerk nodded nervously. Yes, Your Highness, I will note both statements. Aurelio's voice drifted in, smooth. If I may, he said, I can attest that the woman is capable of deception. Isabel's head snapped toward him. You do not know me, she said. Aurelio's smile turned pitying. I know your circles. Fernando's voice sharpened, still controlled. You will not offer character judgments as evidence, he said. Aurelio's brows lifted. Your Highness, character is often all we have when facts are hidden. Fernando's gaze held his. Then perhaps we should stop hiding facts, Fernando replied. The clerk's pen hovered uncertainly. The innkeeper leaned closer to the clerk as if whispering instruction. Write that she attempted to leave, the innkeeper said quickly. Write that she refused to pay. Isabel's hands trembled. I refuse to pay for a debt that is not mine, she said, and I attempted to leave because you shamed me in public. The innkeeper scoffed. You were grateful enough to eat, he said. Isabel's face flushed. I ate so my child would not, she said, voice cracking despite her effort. Do you understand that, or do you only understand coins? Tomas pressed his cheek against her arm, frightened by the tension. Fernando's voice softened slightly, not for the innkeeper, but for Isabel and the child. Señor Valdez, he said, record that the meal this evening was ordered by me, and that it is not part of this claim. The clerk nodded quickly. Yes, Your Highness. The innkeeper's eyes narrowed. That is not necessary, he said. Fernando looked at him. Everything necessary will be written. Aurelio leaned back, lips pressed, annoyed. The clerk cleared his throat. Señora Navarro, he said gently, do you dispute the handwriting in the ledger? I dispute the ledger itself, Isabel said. The clerk blinked. Meaning? It means, Isabel said, forcing calm, that my name was used without my consent. That is all. The innkeeper laughed sharply. Without consent, he echoed, as if names ask permission. Fernando's eyes narrowed. You will mind your tone, Fernando said. The innkeeper lifted his hands, feigning injury. I am only saying, say less, Fernando replied. Mateo's small voice came faintly from the main table beyond the divider. Father? Fernando turned his head slightly, enough to reassure his son with a glance. I am here, he said. Mateo fell silent again. The clerk dipped his pen. I must ask, he said, reluctant, for your address, Senora, so notice may be delivered. Isabel's stomach clenched. If her address entered the record, the wrong hands could find her room, her landlady, her work. They could tighten the net. She hesitated. Fernando's voice lowered. You may list the address through my steward, he said to the clerk. So the notice reaches her without public exposure. Isabel stared at him. That would tie me to you, she whispered. Fernando's gaze held hers. It would keep your child safe tonight, he murmured back. The clerk looked relieved at the solution, as if grateful not to press her. The innkeeper bristled. Your Highness, he protested. That is irregular. Fernando's eyes cooled. Many things tonight are irregular, he said. You began. Aurelio's smile returned slightly as if savoring the tension. And what of the woman's honesty? Aurelio asked lightly. Will your Highness also provide it through your steward? Isabel's chest tightened. Fernando turned to Aurelio, voice quiet. You are enjoying this, Fernando observed. Aurelio spread his hands. I enjoy decency. Fernando's gaze did not waver. No, you enjoy control. The room beyond the divider seemed to lean closer, as if the whole inn could sense the heat of the words. The clerk swallowed and continued writing faster, eager to finish. I will note, he said, that the accused party disputes the claim and requests examination of the ledger. Yes, Fernando said. And I will note, the clerk added, glancing at the innkeeper, that the claimant asserts accuracy. The innkeeper nodded smugly. The clerk hesitated again, then asked the question Isabel feared most. Señora Navarro, he said softly, do you have any witnesses who can attest to your whereabouts during the spring? Isabel's mouth went dry. Witnesses, people who would stand beside her, people who could risk being dragged into her story. She had no one of consequence. She had only other women who also lived on the edge of respectability, women who could not afford to be seen defending her. Her silence was an answer the innkeeper loved. There, the innkeeper said, satisfied. You see? Nothing. Tomas began to tremble against Isabel's arm. Isabel forced herself to speak. I have no witnesses you would accept, she said. Fernando's voice came, even. Then we will find evidence, he said. Aurelio's brows lifted. Evidence? Of what, Your Highness? Of a woman's virtue? Fernando's gaze turned icy. Of a man's fraud, Fernando replied. The innkeeper stiffened. Fraud? He sputtered. Your Highness, that is an accusation. Fernando nodded slowly. Yes, he said. It is. The clerk's pen froze mid-stroke. His eyes widened. Your Highness, he stammered, I must be careful with such words in a municipal record. Fernando's tone softened slightly, but stayed firm. Then write this, he said. Write that I, Fernando de Alcázar, request formal review of the ledger for irregularities. Isabel's breath caught. He had said his own name like a stamp. He had put himself on the page. The innkeeper's face went pale. Aurelio's smile faltered for the first time. The clerk swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes, Your Highness, he whispered, and began to write. Isabel's heart pounded. This was what she had tried to avoid. A prince entangling his name with hers. The room would feast on it. Miguel Ruiz's voice drifted from the main room, distant but clear. Your Highness, he called, polite and urgent, a message may be sent at once to those concerned, to prevent misunderstandings. Fernando did not answer him. Isabel's hands shook. Why are you doing this? She whispered to Fernando, unable to stop herself. Fernando did not look at her immediately. When he did, his eyes were steady, almost tired. Because my son is watching, he said quietly, and because I am tired of being the kind of man who looks away. The clerk cleared his throat. One more matter, he said, hesitant. When an accusation of dishonesty is recorded, it may trigger review by the charitable committee regarding the welfare of a child. Isabel's blood turned to ice. Tomas clutched her tighter, sensing her fear. What does that mean? Isabel asked, voice thin. The clerk's eyes flicked to Fernando, then back to Isabel. It means, he said gently, that if the committee believes a child's needs are not being met, they may request oversight. Oversight, Isabel repeated, barely breathing. The innkeeper smiled almost imperceptibly. Aurelio's gaze gleamed, satisfied. Miguel Ruiz's voice from beyond the divider sounded almost pleased. And that, he said softly, would be most unfortunate for everyone involved. The clerk dipped his pen again, and in the sudden silence the scratching sounded unbearably loud as he wrote the words that could change Isabel's life. Isabel Navarro, accused of dishonesty, subject to review for the welfare of her child. The scratching of the clerk's pen seemed to crawl over Isabel's skin. Subject to review, she repeated, and the words came out faint. For the welfare of her child. Tomas clung to her, as if he could keep her from falling through the floor. Mother, he whispered, what does review mean? Isabel swallowed hard. It means nothing, she lied, too quickly. Prince Fernando's voice came steady, close to her shoulder. It will mean nothing, he said, correcting her gently, because it will not be allowed to become something. Senor Valdez, the clerk, looked as if he wished he were anywhere else. Your Highness, he said, cautious, I only follow procedure. If a claim suggests, then write procedure properly, Fernando said. You have not established dishonesty. You have recorded a dispute. The innkeeper's mouth tightened. But the ledger, Fernando turned to him, is not a verdict. Aurelio Santisteban leaned against the divider as if he owned it. Procedure exists for a reason, he said mildly. Children suffer when mothers... Isabel's head snapped up. Do not speak of my child as if he were a lesson, she said, voice trembling with contained rage. You do not know what he has endured quietly. Aurelio's smile widened a fraction. I know what society must endure. Fernando's tone turned colder. And I know when a man hides cruelty under the word society, he said. Aurelio lifted his brows. Cruelty is a dramatic word, Your Highness. Fernando did not raise his voice. Then allow me a practical one, he replied. Leave. Aurelio blinked. Excuse me? Fernando's gaze held his. You are not the claimant, he said. You are not the clerk. You are not the accused party. You are a spectator who enjoys pressing a bruise. Leave this alcove. Aurelio's smile faltered again, and annoyance flashed across his face before he smoothed it. "If your highness insists," he said, bowing slightly, "I would hate to be accused of lingering." "Go," Fernando repeated, still calm. Aurelio stepped out, but he did not go far. Isabel could still sense him hovering on the other side of the divider, listening. The clerk cleared his throat again, pen trembling slightly. "Your Highness," he said, "what precisely do you want written?" Fernando leaned slightly toward the table, eyes on the paper. "Write this," he said. "The claimant alleges an unpaid balance. The accused disputes the claim and requests review. No finding is made tonight. No inference regarding the child's welfare is to be drawn from an unresolved dispute." The clerk blinked. "I can record that no finding is made." "Do so," Fernando said. The innkeeper's face reddened. "That is not standard," he protested. Fernando's gaze lifted. "Then consider it a correction," he said. Senor Valdez dipped his pen again. "Yes, Your Highness," he murmured and began to write. Isabel's chest still felt tight, but the pressure shifted. It was no longer a trap closing. It was a rope being loosened, knot by knot. Tomas looked up at her. "Mother," he whispered, "are they going to take me?" Isabel's throat burned. She bent her head, pressing her lips to his hair. "No," she said, and she made herself believe it as she spoke. "No one is taking you." Fernando's voice softened, meant for the child to hear. "No one," he repeated. Tomas stared at him, then nodded slowly, trusting the calm more than the words. From the main room, Miguel Ruiz's voice carried through the divider, polite and insistent. "Your Highness," he called, "this has become unfortunate. There are ways to soften it." Fernando did not answer. Miguel continued as if he could not bear silence. "A simple settlement," he said, "quietly, and the matter ends. No record, no committee talk, no scandal." Isabel's eyes narrowed. Quietly, always quietly when powerful hands wanted to erase the trail, Fernando finally spoke without turning his head. "You speak as if you care about her peace," he said. Miguel's voice remained smooth. "I care about order, Your Highness." Fernando's tone sharpened slightly. "Order that feeds on fear is not order," he said. "It is convenience." The clerk finished writing and looked up, relief in his eyes. "Your Highness," he said, "I have recorded it as you instructed." Fernando nodded. "Read it aloud," the innkeeper sputtered. "Aloud?" "Yes," Fernando said. Senor Valdez swallowed and read, voice careful. The words were plain, but Isabel felt their power. Dispute, no finding, no inference. Those phrases were a door kept open instead of slammed shut. When the clerk finished, Fernando said, "Now add this. The evening meal was ordered by me, Prince Fernando de Alcázar, and bears no relation to the alleged prior charges." The clerk nodded quickly and wrote again. The innkeeper's face tightened into something near panic. "Your Highness," he said, lowering his voice, "surely my inn should not be dragged into—" "You dragged it," Fernando replied, eyes on him. "You chose public shame as your method." The innkeeper's voice became pleading. "I had to protect myself," he said. Fernando's gaze was steady. "Then protect yourself with honesty," he replied, "not with a woman's name in your mouth." Isabel forced her breathing to slow. This could still turn. She knew it. Men like Gaspar Rivas did not surrender easily. Men like Miguel Ruiz did not stop reporting. Men like Aurelio Santisteban did not let go of a rumor once it pleased them. Fernando folded the clerk's paper carefully. "Senor Valdez," he said, "you will keep the original in your folder. You will give the claimant a copy. You will give the accused party a copy through my steward." The clerk nodded. "Yes, Your Highness." The innkeeper's mouth fell open. "Through your steward?" he repeated. Fernando's eyes did not blink. "Do you want her address in a public ledger?" he asked. The innkeeper hesitated, then forced a reluctant bow. "No, Your Highness." Fernando's tone remained even. "Then accept the arrangement," he said, "and be grateful I am offering it." The clerk gathered his things with trembling hands and stepped out of the alcove quickly, as if the air was safer outside. That left Isabel, Tomas, Fernando, and the innkeeper, with Aurelio's listening silence beyond the divider, and Miguel's watchful presence in the room. Gaspar Rivas cleared his throat. "Your Highness," he said, trying to regain control, "the review will show the truth. Fernando nodded. Yes, he said, it will. The innkeeper's eyes darted to Isabel, and for a moment his expression sharpened, as if he could not help himself. Senora, he said, if you had lived quietly, none of this would have been necessary. Isabel's hands shook. She kept her voice level. If I had lived quietly, she said, my child would have learned that silence is the price of being allowed to exist. Fernando's gaze flicked toward her, and something like approval passed in his eyes. The innkeeper's lips pressed. You may go, he muttered. Isabel moved at once, pulling Tomás gently toward the divider. But Fernando did not move with her. He turned to the innkeeper, voice low. You will remain, he said. Gaspar stiffened. Your Highness. Fernando's tone was polite, and that politeness was more frightening than anger. You will answer one question, he said, and you will answer it truthfully. The innkeeper swallowed. Of course. Fernando held his gaze. How did you know her name? He asked. Isabel froze behind him. Gaspar's eyes flicked to the main room. It is known, he said weakly. Fernando's voice stayed calm. That is not an answer, he said. Her name was in your ledger for the spring. You say she lodged here, she says she did not. So I ask again, how did you know her name? Gaspar's mouth tightened. I hear things, he said. Fernando's gaze remained steady, unblinking. From whom? He asked. Gaspar's eyes darted toward the traveller's table. Isabel's stomach dropped. Fernando's voice lowered further. Santisteban, he said, not a question now. He supplied it. Gaspar's shoulders sagged a fraction. He only mentioned it, he muttered. He said it would be wise to keep watch, that certain people might come, that if she appeared, there might be an opportunity to... To what? Fernando asked softly. Gaspar licked his lips. To settle old balances, he said. Isabel's breath caught. Old balances, not coins. Power. Fernando's eyes narrowed. Whose balances? Gaspar hesitated too long. Fernando's voice cooled. Be careful, he said quietly. You are speaking to a prince who has already placed his name on paper tonight. Gaspar's face paled. A household, he whispered. A noble household. Isabel felt her heart pound hard enough to hurt. Fernando's gaze sharpened. Which household? Gaspar shook his head quickly. I cannot... Fernando leaned slightly closer, still not raising his voice. You can, he said, because if you do not, I will ensure your ledger is reviewed not only for this claim, but for every claim you have ever written. Gaspar's breath came shallow. He whispered, Valcarcel. Isabel's vision swam. Valcarcel. The crest. The seal. Fernando's jaw tightened, the smallest crack in his control. Doña Leocadia de Valcarcel, he said, more to himself than to Gaspar. Gaspar nodded miserably. She sends men, he whispered. She sends messages. She does not like disorder. Isabel's fingers went numb again. Disorder. That was what they called a woman refusing to disappear. Fernando straightened slowly. You will return to your counter, he told the innkeeper. You will speak to no one about her address. You will instruct your staff to speak with respect, and you will inform Don Aurelio Santisteban that if he wishes to clarify anything, he may clarify it to my steward in writing. Gaspar stared. Your Highness. Fernando's eyes turned hard. Go, he said. Gaspar fled, nearly tripping over his own urgency. Isabel stood frozen. Tomás pressed against her. Fernando turned to her at last, and his voice softened. You heard that name, he said quietly. Isabel's lips parted, then closed. Her pride fought with her fear. I heard many names, she said. Fernando did not push immediately. He only nodded once, as if acknowledging a wound without touching it. Come, he said. We will not remain here. Isabel's stomach clenched. Where? She asked, wary. Fernando glanced toward the main room. Somewhere your child can sleep without listening for footsteps, he said. Isabel's throat tightened at the quiet accuracy of that. Mateo appeared at the edge of the divider, eyes wide and anxious. Father, he said. Are we leaving? Fernando's expression softened at his son. Yes, he said. We are. Mateo looked at Isabel and Tomás, then back to his father. Are they coming too? He asked. Isabel bristled, ready to refuse for pride's sake. Fernando answered before she could. "If they choose," he said. Isabel lifted her chin. "I choose my own steps," she said, voice low. "And I do not step into traps, Your Highness." Fernando met her gaze. "Good," he said simply. "Neither do I." Miguel Ruiz approached, moving with smooth urgency, stopping at a respectful distance that still felt like pressure. "Your Highness," Miguel said, "I must advise." "No," Fernando said, without anger. "You must listen," Miguel blinked. "Your Highness?" Fernando's voice remained calm. "You will deliver a message," he said, "to Doña Leocadia." Miguel's jaw tightened slightly. "I do not serve her. I serve—" Fernando's eyes cooled. "You came with her seal," he said. "That is service enough for tonight." Miguel hesitated. Fernando continued, voice steady. "Tell her I have met Isabel Navarro," he said. "Tell her I have heard her name spoken with malice in a public inn. Tell her I have requested review of a ledger that appears to have been arranged with her household's interest. And tell her this: if she wishes to speak of propriety, she may do so to me directly. Not through messengers, not through innkeepers, not through men who enjoy whispers." Miguel's face remained composed, but the color rose slightly at his ears. "Yes, Your Highness," he said through tight politeness. Fernando's tone softened only at the end, and that softness was sharper than steel. "And tell her my son was watching," he added. Miguel bowed stiffly and stepped away. Aurelio Santisteban lingered near his table, eyes bright with calculation. Fernando turned his head slightly toward him. "Don Aurelio," Fernando said. Aurelio's smile returned. "Your Highness." Fernando's voice was mild. "You may keep your memories," he said, "but you will not sell them tonight." Aurelio chuckled lightly. "Sell? I only speak." Fernando's gaze held his. "Then speak elsewhere," he replied. Aurelio's smile thinned. "As you wish." Isabel wanted to leave before Aurelio found another sentence to throw. Fernando gestured toward the door. Outside, the night air felt colder, cleaner. A carriage stood not far, with a driver who looked toward Fernando and sat straighter. Mateo climbed in first, obedient but still watching Isabel, as if he feared she might vanish. Isabel stopped at the carriage step. "No," she said suddenly. "I cannot." Fernando turned toward her. "You can," he said gently. Isabel's hands shook. "If I enter that carriage," she said, voice tight, "I become your story, your secret, your scandal." Fernando's eyes softened. "You become a mother whose child sleeps," he said. "That is all I want tonight." Isabel's pride rose like a shield. "And tomorrow?" she asked. Fernando did not hesitate. "Tomorrow we address the record," he said, "and the ledger, and the hands behind it." Isabel's throat tightened. "You do not know what those hands can do," she whispered. Fernando's gaze stayed steady. "I know what they already did," he replied quietly. "They made you afraid to accept a safe seat in a carriage." Isabel flinched because it was true. Tomas tugged her hand. "Mother," he whispered, exhausted. "Please." Isabel closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Then she lifted Tomas into the carriage first. The child curled into the seat, as if he had been waiting all day for softness. Isabel climbed in last, stiff with caution. Fernando entered after her, sitting opposite, leaving space as if he understood space was dignity. The carriage rolled forward. For a few moments, no one spoke. The wheels made a steady sound that felt like a lullaby and a warning at once. Mateo whispered to Tomas, uncertain but trying. "Do you like bread with oil?" he asked. Tomas blinked sleepily. "Yes." Mateo nodded, relieved to have found a simple question. "I like it too," he said. Tomas's mouth twitched. "It is better when it is warm." Mateo leaned forward, earnest. "We can ask for warm bread tomorrow." Isabel watched the boys, her chest aching with the strange tenderness of it. Fernando's voice came soft. "Where are you staying?" he asked Isabel. Isabel's shoulders stiffened. "I do not give my address to strangers," she said. Fernando nodded. "Reasonable." Isabel's fingers clenched in her lap. "Then where are you taking us?" she asked. "To a guest house run by respectable women," Fernando said. "A place that accepts families. It is not mine. It is not my palace. It is simply safe. Isabel studied him. And the price? She asked. Fernando's gaze did not waver. No price, he said. Isabel's laugh came out sharp and quiet. There is always a price, she said. Fernando's voice lowered. Then let the price be this, he said. Let me do one decent thing without you being punished for it. Isabel looked away, swallowing the sudden sting behind her eyes. Who are you, she whispered, to speak like that? Fernando did not answer immediately. A man who has been praised for his discipline, he said at last, and has learned that discipline can become a way of avoiding pain. Isabel's mouth tightened. And now? She asked. And now, he said quietly, my son asked me to look. Mateo, hearing his name, lifted his head. Father, he said, worried. Are you angry? Fernando softened instantly. No, he said. I am thinking. Mateo nodded as if that explained everything. The carriage stopped before a modest building with a small lantern at the door. A woman stepped out, older, composed, eyes alert. She greeted Fernando with a respectful nod. Your Highness, she said. Fernando inclined his head. Sister Pilar, he said. Thank you. Isabel's stomach tightened at the word sister, but it was not fear. It was relief that this was not a lavish house with male servants and whispering maids. Sister Pilar's gaze moved to Isabel and the children. It was not judging. It was assessing, the way a woman who had seen hardship assessed another. You are welcome here, Sister Pilar said to Isabel simply. No questions tonight. Isabel's throat tightened. Thank you, she managed. Inside, there was a small room prepared, clean, simple, warm enough. Tomas climbed onto the bed as if his body had decided for him. His eyelids drooped immediately. Mateo hovered near the doorway, uncertain. Father, he whispered, will Tomas be all right? Fernando's voice softened. Yes, he said. Mateo glanced at Isabel. Then, awkwardly, he stepped closer to Tomas and placed a small piece of wrapped sweet bread on the bedside table. I saved it, Mateo said in a rush. For later. You can have it. Tomas blinked at it, sleepy gratitude shining. Thank you, Tomas whispered. Mateo nodded, deeply satisfied, as if he had completed a duty. Sister Pilar led Mateo to an adjoining room. Come, little prince, she said gently. You must sleep too. Mateo looked back once at his father, then followed. When the door closed, Isabel found herself alone with Fernando in the small sitting area just outside the sleeping rooms. Her spine stiffened at once. You should go, she said. Fernando did not move. I will, he said. After we speak. Isabel's hands trembled. She folded them tightly. We have spoken enough, she whispered. Fernando's voice was low. You recognize the crest, he said. Isabel's jaw tightened. I have seen many crests, she said. Fernando nodded slowly. And that name, he said. Valcastle. Isabel's breath caught. She could have lied again. She was practiced at it, but lying felt useless now. The past had already walked into the inn and said her name aloud. She ruined me, Isabel said, and her voice came out flat with old pain. Fernando did not react with shock. He only listened. Why? He asked. Isabel's hands clenched. Because I knew something, she whispered. Because I was close enough to hear what women were not supposed to hear. Because I refused to pretend I had not heard it. Fernando's gaze sharpened. And they punished you, he said. Isabel nodded once, swallowing. I served in her household, she said. Not as family, not as a friend. As a lady's companion. I worked, I followed rules. I believed rules would protect me if I obeyed them. Fernando's mouth tightened. But rules protected her, he murmured. Not you. Isabel's voice trembled now, and she hated that it did. There was a promise, she said. Not from her, from someone who wanted to marry me. Someone who said he would make me safe. And then a letter appeared. A letter I did not write. Words I did not say. Suddenly I was accused of things I could not disprove because no one wanted to believe me. Fernando's jaw tightened. Forgery, he said quietly. Isabel nodded. And then, she whispered, glancing toward Tomas's room, I was alone. Fernando's gaze softened. And your child, he said. Isabel's throat tightened. Yes, she whispered. Fernando was silent a moment. Isabel, he said, saying her name without title, without display, just a name. Human. Isabel flinched anyway. You should not say it like that, she whispered. Like what? He asked. Like it matters, she said, voice breaking despite her effort. Fernando's eyes did not leave hers. It matters, he said. Isabel shook her head quickly, desperate. You do not know what you are doing, she whispered. They do not forgive, they do not forget. They will twist this. They will say I trapped you. They will say you are weak. They will say your son is learning disgrace. Fernando's expression tightened at the mention of his son. My son is learning something, he said, voice low. He is learning that power without mercy is shameful. Isabel's breath caught. Fernando leaned forward slightly, not invading, but closing the distance with intention. They threatened your child, he said quietly, with committees and records and oversight. That is not concern. That is control. Isabel's hands trembled. Yes, she whispered. Fernando's voice remained steady. Then I will remove their leverage, he said. Isabel stared at him. How? She whispered. Fernando did not look away. By giving you a protection they cannot argue with, he said. My name, my household, my lawful authority. Isabel's breath stuttered. You mean to keep me, she said sharply, because fear disguised itself as anger. Fernando's voice was firm. I mean to stand beside you, he corrected. Isabel shook her head. That is not the same, she whispered. Standing beside me costs you. Fernando nodded once. Yes, he said simply. And leaving you costs me something too. Isabel's eyes narrowed, confused by the honesty. What could it possibly cost you, she whispered, to leave a woman like me behind? Fernando's gaze held hers, and his voice softened. It would cost me the man my son believes I can be, he said. Isabel's throat tightened so hard she could barely breathe. Fernando continued, calm and clear. I will not offer you pity, he said. I will offer you choice. Isabel's fingers clenched. And what choice is that? She asked. Fernando's voice did not shake. Marry me, he said. Isabel went very still. The words did not feel romantic at first. They felt like a bell struck in a quiet room. She searched his face for the cruelty she expected, for the smugness of a man offering a bargain. She found neither. You cannot mean that, she whispered. I do, he said. Isabel's mouth opened, then closed. You barely know me, she said, voice thin. I know what I saw, he replied. A mother counting coins with dignity, a woman refusing to be humiliated, a person who has been pushed down and still stands. Isabel's eyes stung. She blinked hard. And what do you want in return? She whispered again, because she could not stop asking. Fernando's tone was quiet. I want honesty, he said. I want you to tell me the truth, even when it is difficult. I want you to accept protection without believing it makes you small. And I want, in time, to earn your trust. Isabel's breath trembled. You speak as if marriage is a shield, she whispered. It is, Fernando said, and it can also be a home if we build it carefully. Isabel shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. They will say you are doing this out of guilt, she said. Let them, Fernando replied. They will say I am ambitious, she whispered. Let them, he said again. Isabel's voice cracked. They will never stop, she whispered. Fernando's gaze did not waver. Then I will not stop either, he said. Silence held between them. Not empty silence, heavy silence, full of consequences. Isabel's mind raced. Safety for Tomas. A roof that could not be taken by a landlady's whim. A record that would not swallow her. And yet, the terror of being pulled into court life, of being watched, shaped, measured. She whispered, I will not be your ornament. Fernando nodded immediately. You will not, he said. I will not be your secret, she added fierce. You will not, he said again. If you become my wife, you will be acknowledged, publicly. Isabel's hands trembled harder. And if I refuse? She asked. Fernando's voice softened. Then I will still protect you as I am able, he said, but I will not pretend it will be enough against their machines. Isabel closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Tomas breathed softly in the next room. Isabel opened her eyes and looked at Fernando, as if she were looking at a door she had never been allowed to touch. If I say yes, she whispered, it is not because you saved me. Fernando's gaze softened. Say it, for whatever reason is true, he replied. Isabel swallowed. If I say yes, she whispered, it is because my child deserves peace, and because I will not let them write my life for me again. Fernando nodded, slow and solemn. Then write it, he said gently, with me. Isabel drew a careful breath. Yes, she said, the word small and steady. I will marry you on one condition. Fernando's eyes sharpened with attention. Name it, he said. Isabel's voice steadied as she spoke, as if the condition itself were a spine placed back into her body. You will not silence me, she said. Not for court comfort, not for convenience. If I am to stand beside you, I stand as myself. Fernando held her gaze. You have my word, he said, and you may hold me to it. Mourning did not soften the world. It only made it clearer. Isabel woke before the bells, sitting up too quickly as if her body expected someone to burst in with a notice and a seal. Tomas slept on his side, one hand still curled around the sweet bread Prince Mateo had given him, as if he feared it might vanish. Isabel pressed her palm to her own chest and forced her breathing to slow. A quiet knock came at the sitting-room door. Sister Pilar's voice followed, gentle and practical. Senora Navarro, the prince is here. Isabel's spine stiffened at once. She rose, smoothed Tomas's blanket and stepped into the sitting-room. Prince Fernando stood by the small table as if he had been there all night, though he had not. His coat was neat. His expression was steady. He looked up the moment she entered. Good morning, he said. Isabel kept her voice low. Good morning. He did not move closer. He seemed to understand that distance was still her armor. Did you sleep? He asked. Isabel almost laughed. My body slept, she said. My mind did not. Fernando nodded once as if he had expected that. The clerk will arrive within the hour, he said. Not here, at the municipal office. It will be done properly. Isabel's hands tightened in front of her. And then? And then, Fernando replied, we remove the lie from the page. Isabel's jaw set. You speak as if paper is obedient. It is not, Fernando said, but it can be corrected. And when it is corrected, the mouths that fed on it will lose their meal. A soft sound came from the doorway. Mateo appeared, hair still slightly tousled, trying to look like a little gentleman. He held his jacket as if he had dressed himself quickly. Father, Mateo whispered, then noticed Isabel. He paused, uncertain, then bowed clumsily the way he had been taught. Good morning, Senora. Isabel's throat tightened at the effort. Good morning, she said softly. Mateo glanced toward Tomas's room. Is Tomas awake? No, Isabel said. Not yet. Mateo nodded, relieved. I saved another sweet bread, he blurted, then looked at his father as if he had confessed something improper. Fernando's mouth softened for a moment. You may give it to him later, he said. Mateo nodded vigorously. Yes. Sister Pilar entered with a tray of tea that smelled like calm. She set it down without fuss, then looked at Fernando with the quiet authority of a woman who had seen powerful men forget they were human. You will eat, she told him simply. Fernando gave a brief, respectful nod. Yes, sister. Isabel stared. A prince being instructed without offense. It was almost more shocking than the dinner had been. Sister Pilar turned to Isabel. You will eat too. Isabel's pride rose automatically. I have eaten, she began. Sister Pilar's eyes held hers. You will eat. Pride is not breakfast. Isabel swallowed, then nodded. Fernando waited until Sister Pilar stepped out again. Isabel, he said quietly, I asked my steward to bring someone. Isabel's stomach tightened. Who? A woman entered then, older, plain-dressed, with work-worn hands. Her eyes went straight to Isabel, and her mouth trembled as if she had been holding words in for years. Señorita Navarro, the woman whispered. Isabel's breath caught. Carmen. Carmen stepped closer, stopping short as if she did not know whether she was allowed. I heard your name, Carmen said quickly, voice shaking. I heard what they did again. I could not stay quiet this time. Isabel's hands trembled. How did you find me? Carmen looked to Fernando, then back to Isabel. He asked the right questions. He did not ask like a man collecting gossip. He asked like a man looking for the first thread to pull. Fernando remained still. Carmen served in the Valcastle household years ago, he said. She left after certain events. Isabel's throat tightened. You know? Carmen's eyes shone with anger. She had kept polite for too long. I know what Doña Leocadia does with paper, Carmen said. I know how she makes respectable people sign what they do not understand. I know how she makes women disappear behind rumors. Mateo hovered near his father, eyes wide. He looked between the women as if trying to understand why adults made life so cruel. Isabel's voice came out thin. Carmen, why now? Carmen's mouth trembled. Because I saw a child in that inn, she said. Your child. And I thought of you, holding yourself upright even when they pushed. And I thought, if I stay silent again, I deserve every shame I have swallowed. Isabel blinked hard. Fernando's tone stayed calm. Carmen brought something, he said. Carmen reached into her shawl and pulled out a folded paper wrapped carefully in cloth. She held it out with both hands, as if it was sacred. I kept it, she said. I did not know why at the time. I only knew it was wrong. Isabel stared at the cloth. What is it? Carmen swallowed. The draft, she whispered. The letter they forged to ruin you. The first version, before it was copied in your name. I saw it on Doña Leocadia's desk. I recognized the handwriting. I recognized the cruelty. I took it and hid it. I told myself it was only a piece of paper. But it was your life. Isabel's knees felt weak. She gripped the back of a chair. Fernando stepped forward and took the cloth gently, as if he feared tearing it. He unfolded the paper slowly. His eyes moved across the lines. His jaw tightened. This handwriting is not yours, he said to Isabel quietly. Isabel's breath stuttered. No, it is hers, Carmen said. Or her secretary's, under her instruction. She dictated it. I heard her. Mateo whispered, horrified. She lied on purpose? Fernando looked down at his son. Yes, he said softly. On purpose. Mateo's small hands clenched. That is... Unjust, Fernando supplied gently. Mateo nodded, swallowing hard. Unjust. Isabel's voice trembled. If the clerk sees this, he will, Fernando said. And so will the people who tried to stain you again last night. Isabel's pride flared. They will deny it, Fernando nodded once. Then they will deny it in front of witnesses. Carmen's eyes darted to the door, as if she expected someone to drag her away for speaking. Fernando noticed. No one will touch you, he said quietly. You have my protection. Carmen bowed her head, as if she did not know what to do with protection that did not demand payment. Sister Pilar returned and took one look at their faces. It begins, she murmured. Fernando folded the paper carefully and placed it inside his coat, close to his chest. Isabel, he said, I will go to the municipal office now. You may remain here with the children, or you may come. Isabel's first instinct was to hide. Her second was fiercer. If I do not come, she said, voice steadying, they will say I was too ashamed to appear. Fernando nodded. Then you will come. Isabel glanced toward Tomas's room. He is still asleep. Mateo stepped forward at once. I can sit with him, he said earnestly. I can be quiet. I promise. Fernando's eyes softened. You will sit with him under Sister Pilar's supervision. Mateo nodded quickly, relieved to have a task. Isabel hesitated only a moment, then moved to Tomas's door, opening it quietly. Tomas blinked awake, confused. Mother? Isabel brushed his cheek with her fingers. You will stay here with Mateo and Sister Pilar, she said gently. You will be safe. Tomas's eyes widened. Are you leaving? Only for a little while, she said. And then I will return. Mateo stepped into view, holding the sweetbread like a peace offering. Hello, he whispered. I brought you this. Tomas stared, then nodded slowly. Thank you. Mateo looked pleased. We can share it. Tomas's mouth twitched. Yes. Isabel's chest ached at the small alliance. She straightened, lifted her chin, and followed Fernando out. At the municipal office, the air smelled like ink and authority. Men in plain coats looked up too often and pretended they were not looking. Isabel felt the old reflex to shrink. She refused it. Fernando walked beside her, not ahead of her. The clerk, Senor Valdez, appeared quickly, flustered. Your Highness, he said, bowing. "And Senora." Isabel almost flinched at being addressed like a person in such a place. Fernando's steward stood nearby, composed and silent. 2 other men were present as well, one from the municipal council and one older gentleman with spectacles and a ledger of his own. "Who are they?" Isabel whispered. "Witnesses who prefer truth," Fernando murmured back, "and an accountant who knows when numbers are being used as theatre." Senor Valdez cleared his throat. "The claimant has been summoned," he said. "Gaspar Rivas is already here." Isabel's stomach tightened. Gaspar stood near a desk, face shiny with nerves, trying to look indignant. Don Aurelio Santisteban lounged by the wall as if he had been invited, though no one had invited him. Miguel Ruiz stood with polite stillness, expression smooth, eyes alert. Gaspar bowed too eagerly. "Your Highness," he said, forcing confidence. "This is all unnecessary." Fernando's voice remained mild. "Truth is rarely unnecessary." Aurelio smiled. "Good morning, Your Highness, Senora Navarro. How fortunate we all are to seek clarity." Isabel's voice was steady. "Clarity does not frighten me." Aurelio's eyes gleamed. "It should, in your case." Fernando turned his head slightly. "Don Aurelio," he said, calm, "you are not a party in this dispute." Aurelio spread his hands. "I am a concerned citizen." Fernando nodded. "Then be concerned somewhere else." Aurelio's smile tightened. "Your Highness," Senor Valdez interjected quickly, eager to keep order. "If we may proceed, the ledger has been brought." Gaspar placed it on the desk like a weapon made of paper. Isabel's stomach turned, but she kept her face still. The older accountant adjusted his spectacles. "May I?" he asked, and without waiting for Gaspar's answer, opened the ledger to the page. His finger tapped the line with Isabel's name. "Curious," he murmured. Gaspar stiffened. "What is curious?" The accountant's voice remained dry. "Your entries for lodging are generally accompanied by a room designation. This one is not." Gaspar swallowed. I may have forgotten." The accountant turned a page. "You forget often," he said, and pointed again. "Several entries are written in the same ink, same hand, but dated weeks apart." Gaspar's face reddened. "I update my ledger when I have time." The accountant nodded slowly. "Convenient." A murmur moved through the room. Aurelio's smile thinned. Fernando's voice stayed calm. "Continue." The accountant flipped another page. "And here," he said, tapping, "a balance marked as paid, then crossed out and marked unpaid again. No explanation." Gaspar's mouth opened, then closed. Miguel Ruiz cleared his throat. "These are minor irregularities," he said smoothly. "Innkeepers are not trained clerks." Fernando looked at him. "Then why are you here?" Miguel's smile did not shift. "To ensure your Highness is not misled." Fernando's eyes cooled. "By whom?" Miguel hesitated for the first time. "By opportunists." Isabel's hands curled. Fernando turned slightly toward the clerk. "Senor Valdez," he said, "do you have the paper from last night?" The clerk nodded and produced it. Fernando lifted his hand. "And now," he said, "we add evidence." He drew the folded letter from his coat and placed it on the desk. Gaspar stared at it as if it were a snake, then remembered himself and forced a scoff. "What is that?" he asked. Fernando's voice was even. "The draft of the forgery used to ruin Isabel Navarro years ago." The room went still. Isabel's breath caught, but she did not look away. Aurelio's face sharpened. "Your Highness, this is absurd." "Old rumors," Fernando cut in, still calm. "Old crimes are not softened by time." Miguel Ruiz's eyes flicked to the paper. His jaw tightened. Senor Valdez leaned in, hesitant. "May I examine it?" Fernando nodded. "Yes." The clerk read silently, lips moving slightly. Then he looked up, startled. "This is not written in her hand," he murmured. Isabel's voice came steady. "No." The clerk glanced at Gaspar, then at Aurelio, then at Miguel. "Where did this come from?" Fernando answered without hesitation. "From a witness willing to testify." Aurelio's smile turned brittle. "Testify against a noblewoman. That is ambitious." Fernando looked at him. "It is honest." Aurelio's eyes narrowed. "Your Highness cannot be serious. Dragging Doña Leocadia into municipal ink? She is not above truth," Fernando replied. Gaspar's voice wavered. This has nothing to do with my inn. Fernando's gaze fixed on him. Then explain why Isabel Navarro's name appears in your ledger for a season when she did not lodge with you. Gaspar swallowed hard. I told you. I hear things. Fernando's voice softened slightly, as if offering Gaspar a last chance to climb down with dignity. From whom? He asked again. Gaspar's eyes darted to Aurelio. Aurelio's smile vanished. Do not look at me. Gaspar's mouth trembled. He said it would be wise, Gaspar blurted. He said the household would appreciate it. He said, Aurelio snapped. You fool! The word cracked in the room. Not vulgar, but sharp enough. Fernando's voice turned colder. Which household? Gaspar's shoulders sagged. Valcarcel, he whispered again, like a confession. Senor Valdez inhaled sharply. Miguel Ruiz's expression remained smooth, but his eyes hardened. Fernando turned to Miguel. You carried her seal into the inn, he said quietly. Would you like to deny your connection now? Miguel's smile tightened. Your Highness, I serve the stability of the realm. Fernando nodded slowly. Then you will serve it better by speaking truth. Miguel's gaze flicked to the witnesses present, to the accountant, to the municipal councilman. He measured the room like a man realizing the story had shifted. Aurelio's voice rose, trying to reclaim control. This is a spectacle. A prince defending... Fernando turned his head, eyes quiet and final. Careful, he said softly. My patience is not endless. Aurelio's mouth tightened, but he fell silent. Senor Valdez cleared his throat. If Doña Leocadia's household is implicated, this requires higher review. Fernando nodded. It will have it. Isabel's voice came out steady, surprising even herself. And my name? She asked. The clerk looked at her, and for the first time his gaze held respect. This dispute, he said slowly, cannot stand as an accusation against you. Not with this evidence. Isabel's throat tightened. So it will be amended? The clerk nodded. Yes, Senora. The record will state the claim is unsubstantiated pending review, and the committee note... He swallowed. It will be removed. Isabel's knees nearly weakened. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, refusing to show it. Fernando's voice softened, meant only for her. You see? Isabel swallowed. I see ink can be corrected, she whispered. The municipal councilman spoke carefully. Your Highness, if a noble household arranged a false claim... Fernando's gaze remained steady. Then it will be addressed. Aurelio scoffed, trying to appear amused. Addressed by whom? By Romance? Fernando turned to him. No, Fernando said calmly. By commitment. He stepped slightly forward, placing himself beside Isabel, not in front of her. He lifted his voice just enough for the room to hear without shouting. I will marry Isabel Navarro, Fernando said. Silence landed like a blanket. Isabel's breath stopped. Aurelio's mouth fell open, then snapped shut. Miguel Ruiz went very still. Gaspar Rivas looked as if his ledger had caught fire in his hands. Senor Valdez blinked, stunned, then bowed reflexively. Your Highness, the clerk stammered. Fernando's voice remained calm. This is not an announcement for gossip. It is an announcement for clarity. Isabel is not my secret. She is my choice, and her son will not be threatened with oversight again. Isabel turned her head slightly toward Fernando, voice trembling. Here, she whispered. You chose here? Fernando met her gaze. You asked me not to silence you. I am not hiding you. Isabel's eyes stung. She blinked hard. Miguel Ruiz found his voice smooth as ever. Your Highness, such haste may be regretted. Fernando's gaze cooled. It is not haste. It is refusal. Miguel's smile thinned. Refusal of what? Fernando's voice was quiet, but it carried. Refusal to let powerful people decide who deserves dignity. Aurelio muttered, This is madness. Fernando looked at him. No, he said. It is responsibility. Isabel's throat tightened. She forced herself to breathe. Senor Valdez spoke carefully. Your Highness, if this is your intention, it must be arranged according to law. Fernando nodded. It will be. He turned to Isabel, lowering his voice. You can still step back, he said quietly. I will not drag you. Isabel's hands trembled. She remembered her condition, spoken in the guest house. Do not silence me. And now he had done the opposite. He had made her visible with honor. Isabel lifted her chin. I will not step back, she said softly. I will step forward. Fernando's gaze softened, and for a heartbeat the room disappeared. Then Sister Pilar's voice came from the doorway. Then stop making an altar out of the municipal desk, she said briskly. If you mean to do this decently, come. Everyone turned. Sister Pilar stood there with the calm authority of a woman who did not fear titles. Fernando's mouth softened. Sister, she nodded toward the street. The chapel is open. The priest is awake. And children do not care for long speeches. Isabel's breath caught in a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. Fernando nodded once. As you wish. Outside, the air felt sharper, and the town looked ordinary in a way that made Isabel dizzy. Ordinary streets, ordinary doors, and yet her life was changing with every step. At the guest house, Tomas ran out at the first sight of Isabel, nearly colliding with her legs. Mother, he cried. Isabel dropped to her knees and held him tight, her voice breaking despite her effort. I am here, she whispered. I am here. Mateo appeared behind Tomas, trying to look composed and failing. Father, he said quickly. Tomas ate the sweet bread, and he said thank you. And we did not make noise. Fernando crouched to his son's height. I am proud of you, he said. Mateo's eyes widened. Truly? Truly, Fernando replied. Mateo's shoulders lifted, as if a weight had been removed. Sister Pilar ushered everyone along with efficient tenderness. Come. No drama, no lingering. Your feet will not walk by themselves. In the small chapel, the priest looked startled when Fernando entered, then quickly remembered how to bow. Your Highness, he murmured. Fernando inclined his head. Father, I ask a lawful marriage. The priest's gaze moved to Isabel. His expression softened when he saw her hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale, as if she were holding herself together with will alone. And the lady consents? The priest asked gently. Isabel swallowed. She looked down at Tomas, then at Mateo, then up at Fernando. She heard her own voice as if it belonged to someone braver. I consent, she said. Fernando's breath seemed to ease. The priest spoke the words Isabel had heard in other lives, other ceremonies, when she had stood in the background as a servant and watched happiness from the edges. Now the words were for her. Do you, Fernando de Alcazar, the priest said, take Isabel Navarro as your lawful wife, to honor her, to protect her, to walk beside her in truth? Fernando's voice did not tremble. I do, he said. The priest turned to Isabel. Do you, Isabel Navarro, take Fernando de Alcazar as your lawful husband, to honor him, to be his companion in truth, and to build a home with him? Isabel's throat tightened. Her pride and fear rose together, then settled into something steadier. I do, she said. The priest's hands moved in blessing. Then what has been joined lawfully, let no rumor tear apart. Mateo stood very straight, eyes shining, as if he were witnessing the noblest thing in the world. Tomas looked up at Isabel and whispered, Does this mean we stay together? Isabel bent slightly toward him. Yes, she whispered. It means we stay together. Fernando reached for Isabel's hand then, slowly, giving her time to refuse. Isabel did not refuse. His fingers closed around hers with quiet certainty, and Isabel felt for the first time in years that her hand was not shaking because of fear. Outside the chapel, the morning had grown brighter. People turned their heads. A few whispers began, as they always did, but the whispers sounded smaller now, like insects against stone. Miguel Ruiz stood at a distance near the street corner, watching. When Fernando's gaze found him, Miguel bowed stiffly, a man acknowledging that a message would not control the outcome. Aurelio Santisteban was not there. Perhaps he had fled the moment he realized the story would no longer serve him. Sister Pilar guided the children toward a small bench in the chapel courtyard. Sit, she told Mateo and Tomas, and do not attempt heroics. Eat your bread if you have any. Mateo nodded quickly. Yes, sister. Tomas looked at Mateo, then whispered, Are you really a prince? Mateo nodded, embarrassed. Yes. Tomas blinked. Do you have to learn many rules? Mateo sighed, as if he carried a burden older than his years. So many. Tomas thought about it. Then we can learn together. I learn rules too. Mateo's face softened. "Yes," he said. "We can." Isabel watched them and felt something warm and painful bloom in her chest. Not pity, not gratitude, hope. Fernando turned to Isabel, voice low, meant for her alone. "You were right," he said. Isabel blinked. "About what?" "About your condition," he replied. "I will not silence you." Isabel's mouth trembled. "You did not." Fernando's gaze held hers, steady and near. "Isabel," he said softly, "I cannot promise you an easy life. Society will test you. It will test me too." Isabel's chin lifted. "Let it." Fernando's mouth softened into the beginning of a smile. "You are fierce," he murmured. "I am tired," Isabel replied, and her voice shook with something that sounded almost like laughter. "But yes, I am fierce." Fernando's thumb brushed her knuckles, careful, respectful, intimate without taking more than she offered. "You will never count coins for your child's supper again," he said quietly. Isabel's eyes stung. "You cannot promise that," she whispered. "I can promise effort," he replied. "I can promise that your son will never be used as leverage again. And I can promise that when you speak, I will listen." Isabel's voice cracked. "And what do you ask of me?" Fernando did not hesitate. "Walk beside me," he said. "Not behind, not in front, beside." Isabel held his gaze for a long heartbeat, then nodded once, as if sealing it more firmly than any wax. "I will," she whispered. Fernando exhaled slowly, and the restraint in his face eased as if he had been holding himself rigid for years. Then, with the children and Sister Pilar watching from a respectful distance, he lifted Isabel's hand and pressed a simple kiss to her fingers. It was not a display, it was a vow made visible. Isabel's breath caught. She did not pull away. She only said very softly, "Thank you." Fernando's eyes met hers. "For what?" Isabel swallowed, then spoke with quiet truth. "For seeing me," she said. Fernando's voice was equally soft. "For letting me," Sister Pilar called out briskly, as if rescuing them from their own tenderness. "Husband, wife, children, come. The day will not wait for your feelings." Mateo and Tomas both scrambled up, delighted to be summoned as if they belonged in the same sentence. As they walked together down the chapel steps, Isabel felt the town's gaze, felt the old pressure to shrink. But Fernando's hand remained steady around hers, and the boys walked ahead side by side, arguing softly about whether bread was better warm or sweet. Isabel's throat tightened again, and this time she did not fight the tears. Because humiliation had tried to make her small, and yet here she was standing in daylight, chosen and choosing, and the simplest truth rose above every whisper. Dignity can be restored, not by hiding, but by love that refuses to look away. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.